Hello and welcome back. Thank you very much for being here. Man, I need to turn down my headphones. Thanks so much for being here, guys. If you're into true crime, but you like to cut past the sensationalism, the fluff, the drama, you have found the right place, and I'm glad you have. Tonight, we are circling back around on the Neziah Harris case, but we're going to be talking about a specific angle of it, and I'd like to welcome a special guest who, this is her second time on the program. Beth Meeks is joining us to talk about some of the questions when we have questions about gender-based violence. Beth is our woman. So Beth, thank you for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, this case, man. This is a case of a 42-year-old man who is a convicted offender, who has been convicted of SA of very young children, who is now accused. He's being held for court. His name, what is his name? Jarvis Butts. This is Mr. Butts here, 42 years old. And he is accused of the murder of 13-year-old Neziah Harris. And Neziah, actually, one of the crazy things about this case is her body is missing. This is one of those cases where there's going to be a trial where we don't have any of the forensic evidence that may have come from her body. But the main reason that I wanted to talk to you about it, and people were asking me, is to answer some of the questions of how this kind of stuff happens, right? How a 40-year-old guy and a 13-year-old little girl end up being, and I'm going to use this phrase, though I know it's not accurate, but in the mind of like an 11, 12, 13-year-old, maybe the belief that there is a relationship there. Of course, with the caveat that I understand there is not. This is only abuse. But why don't we start there? How does this happen?
So the thing you have to remember is that the brain develops in pieces, kind of from the brainstem up, right? So the last part of your brain that develops is that prefrontal cortex, which is your decision making, your a lot of critical thinking skills, information gathering, right? So these predators that target children in that adolescent range, one of the major benefits that they're getting is that this child does not yet have the range of information that an adult would have. Not only do they not have access to the information, but they don't know what to do with it if they have it, right? So they're just starting to think about their own independent identity. They're just starting to maybe get crushes on other boys or girls at school. And they don't yet have defined parameters around what a relationship means and what love means. And one of the very first things that these offenders do is that they tell these children, well, this is what people do when they love each other. This is what love is. This is what a relationship is. And at that kind of 11 to 13 range in adolescence, you're very like, oh, okay, if that's what an adult says it is, that's what it is, right? That's kind of your holdover from being a little child. So you're at this point where you might know that there is such a thing as a relationship, that you can be attracted to someone, but you don't have an answer for it. An adult is telling you what the definition is. And so I think a lot of kids just believe that. And I will say one of the things that these offenders do is that they'll tell these children, it's just you. You're so special. You drive me crazy. I can't even help myself because you're so beautiful. You're so whatever it is, right? So the child feels very special. They do, in fact, have conversations about how we can't tell anybody because no one will understand. Everyone will think this is something bad, and you and I know that it's not. So now you have a kid that doesn't have their own map for defining the thing, and the offender has now drawn that map. The offender is telling them this is a once in a lifetime special thing between you and I. So they feel special, which I think was a big pressure point in this case with Neziah. I think she feels to me like a lost child. like no one was really paying attention. There was a lot of chaos around her.
She certainly did live in a life of chaos. The actually before we kind of move on, I kind of put the cart before the horse. In court, of course, you are an expert witness in court. That is one of the things that you do. The first thing that the side that you are a witness for will do is establish your credentials, right? Your expertise in order to establish you as an expert witness. Let's talk about that real quick for people who don't know you yet, right? What are your credentials that make you an expert when it comes to gender-based violence in these kinds of cases?
Wow. So I have worked in the field of gender-based violence, child abuse, SA, domestic violence for more than 30 years. I worked at a local program for a long time. I worked with children in groups. I worked with children who were SA'd in groups. I have a bachelor's degree in social work and a master's in forensic psychology. Um, I worked at a domestic violence shelter with people experiencing family violence. I worked in prison settings and jail settings with offenders for more than 10 years. Um, and at this point in my career, I've just done a lot of training and a lot of, travel to various places. At some point, I just had worked with or reviewed so many homicides that I started kind of um, just giving information to friends who would ask. Like a detective might say to me, "Hey, we're interviewing this guy and he's talking like this, and I wonder if this line of questioning seems like it might work." And then over time, there was a case in Louisiana uh, where a woman's murder sentence, she was convicted of homicide, and it was overturned and she was given a new trial. And the reason it was overturned was because she didn't have a domestic violence expert. So they called me um, to be a witness in that case. And after that, then I've done a number of homicide cases after that. So, yeah, probably not a great answer, but that's
No,
kind of
well,
some
it's
of the chunks of it.
okay. So I think that we have established that you are an expert in the field. So the last time we had you on, I think we were talking about the Madeline Soto case, right? We were talking about Mr. Stearns
Yes,
and that whole thing. Okay,
yes.
so when we look at the Neziah Harris case, it appears that, well, at least police have said that she had been being abused by Mr. Butts at least since 2022, which would make her 11 years old when that would have happened.
Yeah.
Um, what are we missing in this? I guess what are the things that, as true crime fans or true crime aficionados, however we would say that, we're looking at this case. What is it that we're missing that we're not understanding?
Um, so one of the things that I think generally people are missing when they see something like this from the outside. So the police are saying he's been abusing her since that time because we found text messages. I would say to you that would be 70% sure that he was abusing her before that time, because the prior incidents that he was convicted for, the victims were much younger. I think between 4 and 8 years old. Very often, sex offenders have an age range that they prefer, so they target kids in that age range.
Oh
So
wow! So
I
like Neziah would be older than his preferred age
yeah,
range. Oh,
yes. So I suspect he started with her earlier.
and is that
Um,
something that they? I mean, if they're able to get away with the abuse for a long time, will they continue with that victim, or will they age out of the process?
well, it depends, but some of them do continue with one victim until they're into their adult years, even. I know that that's hard for people to understand or fathom, but that does happen occasionally. And sometimes they'll do that out of accessibility, right? This is a victim that they can get to. Someone who maybe feels like they have more options or more people that are accessible to them might, you know, be a predator for a time period. And then when the child ages out of their preferred time period, they might move on to other victims.
Oh my goodness. Um, one of the similarities, well, I don't know. Actually, before I was going to tie the case. In fact, Melanie Meadows was saying, "Hey, Gavin, let's see, I need to hide all these lower thirds. Compare this case to Madeline Soto." I think we can. I think there are
Mm-hmm.
definitely some parallels. But
You know,
the other thing that I wanted to ask you before we get to that is in, well, sorry, but tangentially related to the Madeline Soto case, there's this case of her choir teacher having been arrested and
stop.
charged with federal crimes in his, uh, I guess, exploits of young boys on using Roblox, using the internet, right? When I was going over that one, in fact, your name came up during that live stream. One of the things that I remember hearing, and I can't remember if you told us this or not, but the that particular guy, I think, was getting gratification of maybe just holding power or sway over the victims on the side rather than the actual idea of an act with those
Mm-hmm.
victims, right?
Right,
So,
right.
I mean, is this something that is universal in these kinds of cases, or I'm wondering
Um,
if, yeah, if Mr. Butts was feeling that way toward his victims.
yeah. I don't know if it's universal. It is common. A lot of people don't realize this, but even in a lot of cases where there's, you know, like an SA homicide kind of thing, there may not be a physically completed SA act. That doesn't mean that the event is not sexually motivated, right? Because there may be torture that happens. The person may be a sadist. They may get, personal pleasure out of the killing, the torture, just the person being frightened. Um, I think in the case with Naziah, this Mr. Butts is really, he's really into the control piece. One of the things that I saw was like on a local podcast, a young man who is her brother apparently did an interview, and he was responding to some of the questions the public has, right? Like, where were the adults in this house? How did they not know what was going on? And one of the things that he discloses is that at one point there were 8 kids living in this house, and his aunt and this elderly grandmother who had custody of he and Naziah. And he said, she's a nice lady and she goes to church, but he, like, the house was so chaotic that he moved out. That this teenage boy was like, "This is too much. It's
Mm,
overwhelming. I have to go somewhere else." And he said, our grandma couldn't keep up. So it doesn't appear that there was a ton of supervision of her. The other thing that he disclosed was that this Mr. Butts, who was abusing Naziah, was also battering the mother of his children who lived in that house. Like, he
yeah.
had watched an incident where that guy was strangling this woman that is the mother of his children that live in that house. So I would say to you that I think this guy really had like a reign of terror that was visited on this whole family, right? I think everybody knew he was volatile. I think everybody knew he was capable of violence. I think people didn't want to stand up to him or push too hard for things, right? I think some of that is demonstrated in Naziah's text messages. A couple of people I know said, "Well, but you can tell that she thinks she's in love with him in the text messages." And I didn't get that sense. What I got was a lot of reluctance. In the one text, he tells her, "Are you naked yet?" And she's like, "No, I don't want to do that."
Mm,
In another text, he's at the house and she says, "Oh, whoops, I just missed you. I'm not there anymore." Then later in the same text stream, she says, "You better not be in my room." That all sounds
Yeah.
reluctant to me, like a girl who's trying to maybe get some boundaries or distance. But I think, like later, there's one text message where she calls him Bay, but it was, I think it was in the context of maybe even begging him to go get one of those, a pregnancy test or something. It did not strike me like, oh, that's an affectionate exchange, right? Every exchange where she seems to give him some leeway or some uh, connection back
Yeah.
felt to me like an offering to either get something she needs or avoid his anger. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. That has been one of the questions that I've had. I had wondered about, well, if we can go to the what was the name of the commenter? I'm sorry, Melanie Meadows, asking me to compare the case with Madeline Soto. One of the things that I had wondered with Madeline was, did she think that, was she in love with Stefan Stearns? That's kind of one of the questions I had. Now there are indications that she wasn't. Like when he moved away, that's when she started acting like a normal teenager again, started
Yeah.
doing better in school, started being less argumentative with her mom and so forth. So there's definitely indications that she wasn't. But I'm also kind of wondering. I
I
remember when I
think
was
for
a
a lot
kid,
of
just
these
how.
things, there's a period when they do think this is a relationship and they're in love. The question is, when does that thought process expire? Because what tends to happen is, as the abuse goes on, the kids, they're getting older, they're collecting more information, they're seeing how the rest of the world works, they get a crush on a boy their own age, which is something that happened in this Naziah case as well as the Madeline Soto case,
Right,
right?
right.
So they're starting to put two and two together that this is not normal. My other friends have crushes on boys our age, but they don't have some 40-year-old man that they also supposedly are in love with, right?
Yeah,
So, I mean, on one hand, this person being an adolescent is an advantage to this predator, but the very nature of adolescence is that we continue to grow and gain information. And so it gets harder and harder for the predator to wall off the information that the child has. I think that Madeline also demonstrated reluctance when she was talking to her friends at school and saying, the minute I turn 13, I'm going to run away from home, all of that
yeah,
stuff, right? That
yeah.
says she wants to get away probably from him. Um, yeah, I think these are very similar.
Now, there were other similarities about, you brought up the chaotic nature of the home. This is
Yeah,
one of the things that I have been thinking about. In Madeline's case, there was certainly chaos there, right? They
yeah,
had roommates coming in and out. Jennifer Soto was on again, off again with Stefan Stearns. She had been married once before with Madeline. Madeline being present, and Madeline having a sister, then not having a sister, and then she had her own room, but then she had to be moved down. There was a lot of chaos, right?
hmm, yeah,
However, the chaos in the Naziah Harris case seems off the charts to me. Like this is generationally past uh, this kind of chaos, right? Like
yeah,
the
yeah,
sure, her grandmother may be a well-meaning, she may be a lovely woman, right? Church going, all the great things that you can say about her. But I also feel like she spent her childhood and adolescence and growing up years in the
yes,
same
yes,
environment. And so, what
yeah.
does she know about normal anyway? You know what I mean?
Has anyone confirmed whether it's true that the grandmother had a child when she was 11?
I have heard that, but I don't know if that's
Yeah,
confirmed or not.
I, I
But it does
couldn't.
seem like in this neighborhood, in this area, it's not uncommon
Yes,
for teen pregnancies, for preteen pregnancies, right? This is
yes,
something that
yes,
happens
yeah.
in this area.
Part of what made me especially sad about Naziah is that I feel like it just, this is just kind of, as I'm reviewing the case as a whole, it felt like she was a decent kid who got to school,
Yeah.
who seemed to be a nice enough kid. And it feels like she got lost in the chaos. Like people
Yeah.
thought, we don't, you know what? We don't have to pay any attention to her. So we just let her go. She's fine on her own. You know what I mean? It
Oh,
just
maybe
felt like,
maybe she was a little bit of more of a diamond in the rough, and so, oh, she's going to be fine. Let's not worry about her at all.
Right.
Um,
Or, we just have, and I just felt so bad because it was clear that I can't remember. I saw a video somewhere where she was dancing with one of her friends, like maybe they were making a TikTok video, and it
yeah.
seemed pretty apparent to me. It wasn't a great quality video, and I thought she looked pregnant. And I
Yes.
just am like, did everybody in the home not see that? I mean, y'all have a lot of kids in there for not knowing what a pregnant person looks like,
Yeah.
but I just think they might not have thought that that was that out of bounds because, you know, they are used to teenage pregnancies. They're used to having children young.
Yeah.
And they were heartbroken when they said at school she asked for a counselor to talk to, and then the guidance counselor never got to her for whatever reason before she disappeared. And I just felt like,
Probably overworked. There's probably
right,
like
right,
300 facsimiles of
well,
Nasiah running around.
yeah.
That there was one. I was trying to think of the when she was asking it, and telling him in September that my period hasn't come, and asking him if he can get a pregnancy test and all that stuff. I did the math. By the time she died, she was 7 months pregnant. By
Which
my
5
estimation.
months.
What was it?
It was 7 or 5 months. Was it 5 months? For some
Somewhere
reason, I
in,
thought it was,
okay. So
but it
second
was
trimester, let's say.
it was enough that no
Yeah.
one should wonder. It
Yeah.
should have been obvious. Yeah,
No, I saw the same video that you looked at. That was a pregnant child.
yeah.
But yeah, so it's not just
I mean,
chaos in the home, it's chaos in the school, it's chaos in the
yeah.
neighborhood.
One of the things that her brother talked about was like coming out of the neighbor's house or something. And the guy that this Jarvis Butts was sitting in the driveway in his car with one of his kids in the back seat and Naziah in the front seat with him. And the way he phrased it was all up in his face, which I took to mean perhaps they were kissing, embracing, something to this. And he got very angry and went to the car and pulled Naziah out and said, "What are you doing? Don't do that." Sent her in the house, and then, had a short confrontation with Jarvis Butts. And it is hard to believe that there wasn't some sort of intentional denial, um,
Okay, yeah.
that was driven out of an attempt to survive. Because whatever, so it seems to me that again, there's this house full of 8 kids. I know that the mother of Mr. Butt's children is, kind of constantly trying to ask him for help. They don't have a car. They need him to drive them places, all this kinds of thing. Just like in the Madeline Soto case, I said, I don't think this is a person who's fully capable of living on their own, or you wouldn't probably be living in this chaotic environment where you're renting individual rooms out to roommates, right?
Talking
I
about
think,
Jen? Is that what you mean?
yes. I
Okay.
think the same thing is true here. It's not comfortable typically to have, 8 kids and 2 adults running around what is probably not a mansion, right? So
Yeah.
that says to me, you need to pool resources to have a place to live.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the disagreement was about when he was strangling the mother of his children in the living room. But imagine if she had confronted him about possibly reoffending and getting a child pregnant, which they all must have known would surely send him probably to prison for life. I can't imagine that a person who's that violent would have taken that kind of confrontation well. So I wonder if there wasn't almost like la 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 la, we can't see that
Let's
because
get along to
there's,
go along kind of thing, or go along to get
well,
along,
and
whatever.
because this guy is already showing up assaulting people. He already has a bad history. We have no resources. He's providing some resources, right? Like it feels like these people were sort of barely surviving.
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't take one more thing, even though everyone agrees that they should have, right? That there should have been a completely different reaction to this. Uh, and human beings have limitations. And I wonder if they just kind of thought, well, she's pregnant, but that's okay. A lot of people get pregnant at that age. The baby will come in the house. We'll help her with
We'll
the
love the
baby.
baby. Yeah.
We'll never ask about the dad, so we'll all pretend like we don't know, and we won't upset the apple cart with this violent guy over here that might come and do God knows what to all of us.
And who
It's
also gives us groceries from time to time.
right.
Yeah, it's really easy to judge that kind of decision making, but I always remember the whole adage that when you have no good options, you don't make good
Right.
choices, right? And I've talked on my channel a couple times. I've brought up that there's a workbook for social workers. It's called Bridges Out of Poverty, and it's
That's
written written for people to understand that the things that you do may or may not be actually helping. And I'm not a social worker, nor do I have any expertise in it, but I loved it so much. And one of the things that I learned in that book was that within, uh, as we divide ourselves up economically in our society, right, there are rules that are mostly unwritten for every piece of the economic strata, and we all understand the rules of the strata that we are in. We do not understand. It's one of the things that keeps us in the strata that we're in. We don't understand the one above us. We definitely don't understand the one below us. And this may be one of those cases where I'm just looking at it and shaking my head and going, how is this even possible that this could happen? But the rules, the rules of life in that
right.
particular place probably dictate their behavior, right?
Well, and when I'm describing this scenario where something terrible is happening, but we have our hands full trying to survive over here, trying to find enough food for these people, trying to keep a roof for these people, trying to not get killed by this abusive person over here. It it's it is not uncommon for families in that situation to ignore another big something that should be dealt with because they just can't take it on. They're
Yeah.
at their they've reached their capacity.
Yeah. It is interesting how the sins of the fathers and mothers do tend to repeat themselves. And I was thinking of my own childhood. A very close friend of mine got pregnant in high school. She was like the fourth generation in her family that had done that. Right? It
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
it just kept happening. And yeah, I think they were seeing things in their neighborhood that they saw a lot.
You know what is so interesting about that is that we often, at every level, good and bad, implement what we see our parents or our guardian generation
Yeah.
do in front of us. It's why so many people are like, well, my mom was a teacher, so I'm a teacher. My dad was a cop, so I'm a cop.
Yeah.
You know, whatever that thing is. And sometimes it's the less pleasant stuff, right? I was offended and I became an offender. I watched my parents use drugs and I became a drug addict. It is very true that children tend to imitate what they see the guardians around them doing because they think that's how life works. That's
Yeah.
how it's supposed to be.
It's extremely difficult to overcome it. In fact, it's an indication that somebody is living a very purposeful life when they can say, like, for example, let me even put myself on a pedestal. This is so dumb. It's really my wife, but able to say, I had really good folks, like both of us, both my wife and I have really good parents who really, really love us, cared for us, protected us, provided for us. We both won the family lottery the day that we were born. But we can say, I don't like the way mom and dad did that. And it actually is very difficult to purposefully say, I am not going to do that thing. It may even be a thing that's a great thing. I'm just not going to do it that way. Right. It's difficult to, and it's an indication of a person living a purposeful life. One of my moderators literally grew up in trap houses, and she is one of the most, I, I don't even, successful at caring for others who have had that same background but did not overcome it, right? So she has lived a purposeful life to care for others, that and to be empathetic to those that are in that situation. So yeah,
Yeah.
maybe that's the thing that we learn in this case, is for
Yeah.
ourselves to try to be a little more purposeful about how we live.
People that can break that cycle are amazing. Yeah.
It's hard. Yeah. Okay. Tony Miller says, Gavin, I'd love to know what Beth thinks about punishment for offenders, like Florida giving the death penalty for SA. And that is something that has not been tested at the state Supreme Court, and it's not something that they're seeking with Mr. Stearns, but there is a law in the books in Florida that uh, one of the things that you can be sentenced to is death for certain kinds of SA against children. What do you think about those kinds of things?
I think my outrageous little kitten have made a cameo appearance. Apologies. So um, I struggle back and forth with the death penalty. I used to be very opposed to it, and then I worked in a prison setting with people who had been commuted from that sentence and knew in graphic detail what their crimes were. Um, and at that point thought, oh yeah, okay, I understand why we're doing this. Um, I just really struggle, but I think this is something that happens to me a lot because I'm struggling with what my heart and emotional reaction is versus what my brain knows, right? The reality is this: uh, if it's for the essay only, there used to be a law in the books in Louisiana that said for SA, even if the victim lived, you could get DP. And the Supreme Court overturned that and said no. So I was surprised when people were putting that back on the books, but I don't know if it's on the books as a standalone SA crime or if it has to be coupled with, a homicide.
I think in Florida it's against children. I don't think it
Yeah.
has to be coupled
That's
with a homicide. I do
that's
think
the
that the
same
homicide
thing.
laws have aggravating factors like SA that
Right.
qualify,
Right.
right?
Usually to get the death penalty, you have to have two. There has to be another felony that occurs
Yeah,
with the homicide at the same time. So yeah, I would expect that to go all the way to the Supreme Court before
yeah.
someone's defense attorney would let that happen, and it'll just be interesting to see if they rely on that prior ruling or not.
Well,
The
let's rephrase.
reality,
Let's rethink this question though. Instead of what do you think about specifically the death penalty? What about what is the best thing to happen to offenders for the victim, for the offender, and for society? Because those are the three things that we have to balance, right?
right?
What is it that we should be, and maybe rather than looking at the back end, what are the punishment for these offenses, what are things that we can be doing on the front end to prevent these kinds of offenses? Big questions, Beth. You better have the
Yeah,
answers. Go.
right. Protecting yourself against predators. And this is going to sound terrible. The way to view this is that it's a game. They are working on having the very best offense in the country, and you are working on having the very best defense in the country. But you are playing every single day, and some days you win, and some days they win. They have made it their job, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's a good thing to tell parents know where your kids are, know where their phone is, know what they're doing on the computer. Make sure, here's something we don't tell little kids: it is okay to lie for your own protection, right?
Oh,
So
yeah, you brought this up last time. Yeah.
you don't have to just follow any adult willy-nilly. I mean, most of our children are experiencing their parents, their grandparents, their teachers, their Sunday school teacher, and we tell them don't lie to adults and respect adults and follow their instructions. We've got to help them at an early age figure out that that doesn't apply to every single adult they encounter. So there's hours of preventative tips we could give to parents, right? But it's like putting up an alarm system and getting a big dog and some motion detector lights and cameras. Does that make it less likely that your house would be broken into? Sure does. Reduces the risk a lot. Does that guarantee it'll never happen? No, because if you have something in there the offenders want, they're working so hard to find a way in, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I
So
think
we
you it's kind of it's a both and, right? You do have to think about prevention, but there's still going to be the need to think carefully about punishment as well. I think what's difficult for me is when we do see punishment. As an example, the prior two victims that he was convicted for were 4 and 8 years old, and
right.
he did 8 years in prison.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was probably the result of a plea deal because they didn't want to put small children on the stand, right?
Yes.
And
Oh.
so maybe they
No.
had to take a plea deal. But it used to be that the average sentence for a child SO was 2 years. It's gotten better, but I am continually shocked at the number of people that get probation, something like that.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing most people don't realize. Most people committing SA against children never get into the criminal system at all. They often get handled by child protection services, which moves through the civil system and may
Okay.
never transfer to the criminal side.
So is it possible that child protective services go into a home, they see abuse that is happening, they know who the abuser is, and it does not go into the criminal system?
Correct. Yes. Very often.
And what? Okay,
I
I I don't even know how to react to that. That is nuts. That is crazy nuts. But like, what are the reasons? How do you justify that? If you are like, listen, I have issues with anybody who's bad at their job that has power. I don't have issues with people who are good at their job that have power. So people hear me railing on cops. No, I don't have problems with cops at all. I love cops. I'm very thankful for cops, but bad cops, they piss me off, right? Same thing is going to happen with anybody that has power. Like, and I do think that there is a danger of child protective services having way too much power. But how does one justify if you know that there is something seriously going on criminal? How do you justify not making that a criminal matter?
well, so I think a couple of things. Here's the first one. I think Children's Services has a marketing problem because they call themselves child protection services. So we expect that, they've gone to the nth degree to do everything possible on the menu for that. When in fact, usually their legal mandate is to do everything they can to preserve families.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right. So they make these safety plans. Listen, I have worked with families that they know one of the children in the family has been sexually abused. And the safety plan to keep that child safe is the SA offender has gone to live with his mom, with his elderly mother. And the safety plan is when the child is at his house with him, the elderly mother agrees she's not going to leave the room. That is pretty darn common. You'd be surprised how often the safety plan is the offender can still have access to the children, but he's going to promise that somebody else will be in the room the whole time.
No, that, okay. So
Yeah,
I don't even know where to start with this here.
I know.
But
So the next problem you have to remember is they are dealing with small children, and it is very difficult to put small children on the stand, right? And so in a lot of child abuse cases, they'll say that it's maybe they'll say there's it's founded versus unfounded, right? So they might find that there is risk to the child in the home, and I think when they stay in the civil system, they are either charges that would be more minor or like not rise to the level of serious felony, or charges for which they cannot get past beyond a reasonable doubt,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So it's interesting because after we were done talking about the Madeline Soto case the last time, and I saw a lot of people like being angry at her mother, thinking her mother should have done X, Y, Z. And what I thought to myself at that point was not everything that is wrong Not everything that is morally wrong is illegal. And that's
Yeah.
something we struggle with as crime observers, right? We find
Yeah.
something objectionable because it's morally wrong, and we think that there can be a charge for that when there can't always.
And
Now, there's
we really don't want to give that much power anyway to those that would
right.
charge it. That could really be abused. Hold on. There are three different branches of thought that I just have so many questions now. Give me just a second, though. Teresa Clay asked, "What's the name of that book?" It's called "Bridges Out of Poverty." It's written. It's from the Christian point of view, and the idea is that a Christian, a lot of Christian like missions that go off and they dig wells or they build sorts of things in other countries end up creating dependence, and so the idea is to not create dependence, to create independence. It's a great book. Check it out. And then there was one other that came in that I wanted to say thank you on. Autumn's been a member for 10 months. That's pretty rad, Autumn. Thank you very much for that. Uh, let's see. It's Tanya. Thank you very much for the super chat. Wanted to recognize that. Thank you, Tanya, for doing that. Okay. My mind is going a million miles an hour here. Getting back to the plea bargaining thing. This is actually one of my personal jihads. It is in my county, for example, we get about 1,200 cases in the court, not including like traffic, none of the summary stuff, right? None of the landlord tenant stuff or traffic or whatever. We get about 1,200 cases, and they range from like DUI to murder, everywhere in between. And we have about 9 trials a year. So 99 point whatever 2% of cases are disposed another way. In my county, just in the last couple of years, there was a man who, over the course of about 30 years, 35 years, moved up from assaulting a woman and not succeeding to assaulting a woman and she talked him out of it, to assaulting a woman and doing 20 years in prison, but he never should have gotten out of prison for what he did to her. And when he got out, he assaulted and murdered an elderly woman. So he just kept raising the bar, and it just kept on going. And at the time, the judge that was overseeing the case was the DA that made that plea deal 20 years prior, right? And I don't blame her because she did what the system is designed to do. And I have a real hard and she's a great person. She's somebody I know personally. She's great. But the system that we have where people can get off, what is the case that happened recently that oh my goodness. Hold on, give me a second. This is the Ben Fields, a guy in Kentucky, was a sheriff and a guy who like managed the ankle monitor thing. He essayed at least 3 of the women that he oversaw, and he got 6 years total, and I think he did 6 months and then 5 years probation. I could not believe it. There's 3 women that had been essayed that they knew about. So, I mean, that's one of the things that just drives me. I don't even know if I have a question there, but what can we do on that? That kills me.
Yep. There are some interesting things to unpack about how much of the system views or interacts with SA victims altogether. That if I go down that road, we'll be here for 3 hours. I'll say this about plea bargains. I thought the same thing, and I went to work in the prison system and realized that, first of all, there are so many cases that no one would ever get convicted of anything if you actually went to trial and had a battle with everyone, right?
Yeah. It's
And
risky.
now in this day and age with things like DNA evidence, a case can take forever. I worked on a homicide case that just to the point where they sentenced someone took 10 years, and now it's in a series of appeals, right? Now imagine if you had, if everybody demanded, a trial that could take that kind of time. Now that's on the long side, but even a quick
Oh,
trial
three,
takes
4 years is normal. Yeah.
right. So that's the first thing. They just wouldn't be able to keep up with the volume. You'd never have any justice in any sort of time for anybody. The other thing is that there are certainly cases that are weaker, right? So on the face of it, when someone says to you, there was an essay of these children, boy, he should have been put in prison for life or 20 years, or whatever it is. The children are small, they may not have good memories. You can't put them on the stand and subject them to a cross examination.
Yeah.
That's a nightmare. And so, very often, if the prosecutor has something and it's bad enough, they can get this person to plea. And prosecutors often, like, honestly, if he assaulted small children, if there wasn't photographic evidence, if the children couldn't testify and they got this guy in jail for 8 years, that's actually really good. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Because he probably, and he pushed it enough, maybe he could have walked away. So, yeah, those are kind of the practicalities. I think when we are taking in true crime externally, we go in expecting the guys in the white hats to win, right? We expect the good guys to win and things to have some sort of, you want to feel good about the outcome. And that's just not what happens a lot of the time.
Oh, well, and even on the other side, I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years, personally sitting in the gallery in the courtroom, I've seen somebody who I believe was innocent get convicted of murder. And I've seen a guy who I know was guilty but was mentally ill get convicted in such a way that he will not receive treatment. So, I mean, the balance is tough.
Well, and that's the other thing, that the cost just to put people in prison are staggering. I mean, if you really talk about appropriate treatment, what should happen is people who are convicted should be sure in a prison setting, but have intense treatment in the prison setting and have monitoring for potentially their whole life once they get out. That monitoring should include regular polygraph testing. Um, yeah. So, but that's expensive. It's expensive to
Yeah, I was
invest
going
in a
to say.
human being that long.
Uh, who was it that just asked? New England Coast, do you get nightmares about these cases?
I do indeed. Yeah.
Do you? Yeah.
Hmm.
Well,
They're not always directly about these cases, but yeah, I have some. I have some tough nightmares occasionally. One time, I wasn't a nightmare. I don't know why. I was sleeping just fine. There was some part of a case we couldn't figure out, and I sat right up in bed and went, "Oh my gosh, this is it!" like the
you
answer
had
came
dreamed
to
it. You had dreamed the answer.
me. Yeah.
Patty Olson says, I work in mental health and have come to believe that people learn what they live. Yeah. My wife and I were talking about this just this past weekend about, there's this, and it wasn't very profound because it was her and I talking about it. So it wasn't like a really deep level conversation, but talking about the whole nature versus nurture thing. And there are things that happen in our hometown that just drive us crazy. We just shake our heads. And one of the things that we've come to the conclusion of is that education doesn't change people behavior. Education doesn't change behavior. Behavior changes behavior. And in order for somebody to, education may lead to somebody changing their behavior, but I know that I'm not supposed to drink so much soda. I have been clearly educated on it. And here I am drinking way too much soda. Right. So, what is it that we can do? I'm sorry. I'm not asking these questions really well. One of the, in light of the conversation that Gavin Kimberly Fish had 2 days ago, it would mean that we need to change people's behaviors in order to get the results that we want. Now, applying that to the whole idea that there are just people that behave criminally. There are just people that are criminals, right? How,
Yeah.
maybe, how do we go about reducing that criminal mindset that a lot of people just seem to have. Like, it's okay to be a criminal.
Um, I there first of all, you have to get them young and get them like on a first offense, right? Is better than waiting. One of the things that the criminal justice system does routinely is, which is related to actually this case. One of the things the criminal justice system does routinely is, the first time that they get a 911 call from a house, let's say where a family violence incident has happened, and they go out and they say, well, we've never been here before, so we'll give you a break. But the thing they don't understand is it's gone on 30 other times.
Right. That's the
And the
first time they've been
family has
called.
really been trying to contain it. So by the time they call 911, it is terrible for them, but it's the first time the cops are hearing it. So the cops are like, well, we want to give everybody a break, right? And so, which is part of what creates that feeling that, well, I shouldn't call them anymore. That doesn't do anything for me.
And the offender can go, oh, I can get away with this.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It fuels their behavior. And I mean, that's a very common thing, right? When you hear sentencing, well, he doesn't have a criminal record, or, she doesn't have any prior incidents of this particular thing, so we'll sentence on the low side. Um, I mean, I don't, right, if the record's not in front of the judge, he can't use it. But I think the reality is people get a lot of breaks before they ever are standing in front of that judge, right? And so I think if we were better, especially in crimes against women and children, about doing our darndest to document everything from the first time we have contact with those people, then judges would have a more robust record in front of them, and people could probably get sentenced to treatment faster, or do some jail time that acts as a deterrent, and then have a suspended sentence that puts them into treatment in the community, things like that. um,
Well,
yeah.
that leads into this question that Moni is asking. Moni is one of my OGs. She's amazing. What do you think? Let's see what she says. Ask Beth if she thinks there may be some offenders who simply just can't be fixed.
I do. Yeah, I do. There are certainly offenders who are sociopaths, narcissists, who maybe have some psychopathy. Um, yeah, I don't think that's the majority of them, um, but I do think there are
Oh,
some.
really? You think it's a small percentage of them
Yeah,
that can't be fixed? Huh. Let's see. Robert Bernardi, so glad you got on the stack. Yeah, it was my fault. I've been meaning to call you a lot lately. We love you here on the channel. Okay, let's bring it. I guess we're almost at an hour here, and we want to be respectful of everybody's time. But let's go back to Naziah here. What do you think should happen now with Mr. Butts if he indeed did do this? He's already, that makes him a repeat offender for sure. What should happen to Mr. Butts?
I'd be very surprised if Mr. Butts is not a guest of the Michigan Department of Corrections for the rest of his life. I also think, a part of the reason this is just now getting some national attention is because a no body homicide is rare. I mean, again, we hear
Yeah.
about them, when we're watching true crime stories, but they're very rare. And there are still prosecutors who won't do it at all because it can be a scary thing. Because if you aren't able to get the conviction, then the person could walk on this, right?
Oh, forever.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
There are
it's
no retries. Most of the time, there are no retries on a homicide
right,
case.
right.
Yeah.
So I have to believe that they're pretty sure about the evidence that they have in hand. And even the little bit, I feel like I haven't dug very far, and the little bit that I can see is, obviously concerning. Um, yeah. And I think it would be probably even best for him if he was in a contained, supervised environment.
Actually, that leads me to a question. What happens psychologically to people allegedly like Mr. Butts that are unable to access an outlet for their particular mental disorder or disease, whatever you want to call it, right? I mean, if he did what he was convicted of, which we don't have to say allegedly on that one, but if he also did to Neziah what he is accused of, he obviously has something in him that is drawing him to do that thing. What happens to him mentally if he, for the next 40 years, sits in a cell as a guest of the state?
Well, so here's an interesting thing that probably doesn't get talked about a lot. There are people who are an absolute menace in free society that when they get locked up are model inmates. They get a job, they're reliable, they never get in trouble. I don't know what that is. There are just some people who seem, like when they're under supervision, they're fine. But if they have to rely on themselves to stay in line, they can't do it.
Hmm.
Maybe he's one of those people. I don't know. I don't know for sure. I mean, one of my questions would be, is he prone to generalized violence, right? Like I see him being violent with the mother of his children. I see him being violent with children he has access to. If he's the kind of person who's generally violent, if he's committed other violent crimes against men, if he gets in fights a lot, then he'll just engage in that kind of violence in prison. I mean, you know, yeah, part of what is, this is a difficult way to understand this, but if you're a predator and you like controlling people and playing those kind of mind games is really interesting to you and it's how you get things that you like in life, when you're locked up in prison with a bunch of other predators, that's like playing the ultimate version of the game you really love.
Oh, yeah.
So,
You're not going after the innocent little gazelles anymore. You're now hunting lions.
right. So very often predators like that are not uncomfortable in prison. They almost, their criminal side thrives because you're with a whole bunch of other people thinking the same way. I mean, you're with a whole pile of targets that you may be violent to or steal things from or just manipulate in any number of ways.
Wow. Man, no, I hadn't thought about that before. But I also, there's a Brazilian serial killer. I was trying to think of like people's behavior in prison. What's the Samuel Little was an American, like the most prolific serial killer in American history, right? And it seems like in prison he was just like, I'm happy to do my little paintings of the people that I killed.
Yep.
Happy to talk to the FBI. Like he's getting that catharsis from releasing his past. And honestly, it just seemed like a docile old guy by the time
Right.
he finally died of natural causes. But then there's like this guy, Pedro. Oh, I can't remember his name, but they call him
He's killed like two people in prison, hasn't he?
Pedrinho Matador. Killed like 30 people before he went to prison, then another 15 to 20 in prison. He was just all about it. He just didn't. Something would set him off, and off he'd go. And the killer about Brazil is that you can't spend more than 30 years in prison for whatever. So off he went. Guy is a prolific killer of mostly bad people.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, it's really interesting. Some would thrive in that. Like
Yeah.
some would get that alter ego really, really active in that situation, and
I
others
think
will
that
paint.
one of the things that true crime never covers about homicides is, they talk about, well, the motive, and like in the cases of these girls, these adolescent girls, I think most of these murders are spontaneous and they are to solve a problem, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I think so.
so some homicides are utilitarian that way, right?
Yeah,
Some are unplanned and they truly can be accidental. Um,
and yeah, they're solving a problem. I kind of feel that way with Stephen Stearns. Feel that way with Jarvis Butts here.
no, but there are a number of times when we say, well, the offense was sexually motivated or whatever, And part of what because I think it's difficult to say out loud, that there are offenders who have so much fun doing these things. That, like, think of your fondest memory ever in life. Think of the most favorite family vacation you ever went on, that when you are, having dinner with your family, you guys bring it up and joke about it. Now imagine that you have those emotions about taking someone's life.
There, that's a frightening thing to think about. I made friends in the UK by going to CrimeCon UK a couple times, and there's this couple that I know that are both retired detectives. She was a detective for the London Metro for like 15 years, and then she became a solicitor. She got her law degree and finished her career that way. He worked in homicide for like 35 years. He had a guy that was just a criminal that he repeatedly arrested over the course of his career, and sometimes he'd get a conviction and sometimes he wouldn't. This wasn't a killer or anything. This was like just like a burglar and a bank robber and kind of one of these guys. But like at the end of the trial, he would come up to the cop and say, "Well, didn't get me this time. We'll catch you on the next." And he loved it. He just loved it. So,
Oh,
yeah. So these quote unquote sexually motivated crimes may not be always about that. It might just be hilarious for them.
yeah.
That is dark.
Yeah.
Very dark. Oh my goodness. All right, let's see. Ruby Slippers says that she thinks that we should do more of this sort of stuff. I agree, Beth. I love having you on. Todd says our justice system is just not harsh enough. So often original sentences are eventually reduced. I wonder about that as far as, deterrence, from being a criminal in the first place. Lee says appreciates your insights so much as a survivor. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming on, Beth. I deeply appreciate it. I hope you will come back. You're always welcome.
I enjoy you and your audience, so I'm glad to do it.
Thank you very much. Stick around for me real quick, okay? Hey guys, we've got a whole week already scheduled out. I think tomorrow we are going back around to Madeline Soto. We're going to be looking at a little bit more of the Stephen Stearns, some of the documents that have come out in the motions in the case of Florida against Stephen Stearns in the murder and abuse of Madeline Soto. So we're going to be doing that tomorrow. So please join me for that. Please remember that you can always catch me on my website, gavinfish.com. If you click the little fishy up there, that will take you to the fish tank where we like to talk about true crime stuff. Hang out in there and join us if that is your deal. And then also, last thing, do not forget about CrimeCod, which is my true crime website and newsletter, crimecod.com. And if you click on newsletter, you can sign up right there. Okay, with that, I will bid you adieu until tomorrow. Hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you for being here. Take care. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below.